And then they came back. I was sitting in the room with him, and they said, we need to transport him to Salt Lake.
Wow.
And they didn't really give a ton of explanation why.
Did they do like a surgery on his brain to relieve the pressure?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. So they put us in the back of an ambulance and sent us to Salt Lake, Primary Children's in Salt Lake. And that was that. We arrived in Salt Lake, and by the time we got to Salt Lake, he was kind of a little in and out of consciousness. But again, once we were in the ER there, it was just this hustle and bustle of activity and lots of doctors and lots of nurses and lots of questions and lots of, but it didn't feel like a ton of answers. No one could give me, and I don't know that there were any answers to give, quite frankly. I say that and it sounds really critical. We were really they took great care of us. So then after a few hours, in the meantime, my husband came from work. He went and picked our oldest son up from school and all of this going on. By the time they came in and said, we're just going to go ahead and admit him. My husband had arrived from picking up our oldest son from school, and we were all just sitting in the emergency room together. And that was it. When he fell, it was immediately when I saw him in the store, when he was face down, unconscious on the floor, his left eye was massively swollen. I mean, his eye was so swollen, it stuck out past his nose. It was really, really, it looked really bad. And so one of the things that they did, and I will never forget, they needed to see what the damage was to his eye. Well, it was swollen shut. And so they had to pry his eye open, which obviously was really painful for him.
For sure. And
they
how
go ahead.
How old was he at this time?
He was 5.
Okay.
Oh man, poor little guy.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, it's really sad. I mean, even in a children's hospital, the
be
gurneys
hard.
are smaller.
Yeah. It's got to be hard to be the parent in that situation. For sure. Yeah. I can't even imagine what you're feeling. Well,
here's the thing about being a mom. When they send you home from the hospital, you just think that you can protect your baby from anything. You do. I know it's really, really naive. And I don't know for all the moms in the room. You think that you'll be able to handle anything. They're going to fall off their bike. You can handle that. They're going to take a tumble off of the trampoline or something. You can handle that.
Yeah.
You look at something like this and you're like,
you don't
where was
really
the handbook?
Plan for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you learned as well as your son that you face hard things and you grow from them, and as a parent,
you are very right.
So it was a thing for you too, a huge
growth. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
This is a perfect time for that quote we've used before. You never know quite how strong you can be until being strong is what you have to be, right?
Yep.
So until you're in that situation, right?
Yeah.
Well, and all the things that you learn in this situation, you have no idea there are even things like that out there to learn.
Sure.
Because you never needed them.
Yeah, you never forced into that position.
Yeah. Okay. So he, at this point, we knew he had fractured his skull. And so when they were trying to pry his eye open, they were pressing on his head but there was no other way to do it. And so he kept looking at me like, fix this, Mom. This is horrible. This is...
Why are you letting them do this?
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
So, but here's the thing that I've always maintained. So he was just from the very beginning, from the second he was born, before we even knew this would ever be an issue, he was my goer and just I'll handle it kind of a personality. From the second he was born, he was, I'm just going to stop. I'm going to figure this out and I'll handle it. It's okay. My older one he's really quick to, well, at least when he was little, really quick to say, I don't get it. I need help.
Yeah.
But my younger one that got hurt, he, from the very, very beginning, he figured out so many things. Yeah. Well, he watched his brother when he was in kindergarten. His older brother was in kindergarten and figured out how to read on his own. Yeah. He would just watch him sitting next to him as the older brother's reading out loud, and he just sort of figured it out. He's like, no, I got it. I can figure this out. So he's really patient. He doesn't ever he never let things really bother him. He's just like, oh, I'll figure it out. I'm not going to get mad about it. I'm not going to cry about it. I'll just handle it.
Strong-willed.
Yep.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting how younger siblings are like that. I have 6 children, all daughters, and I know I said this earlier, but they do
to laugh every time.
It does. People are always like, "What? 6 daughters?" But yeah, the thing is each one, it's like that. You almost coddle and baby the older ones too when they're, because you're like, I need to protect you. But then as you go,
she's my first one.
Yeah, but as you go through, like, that you realize that, wow, they're so capable, and they'll learn things just because their older siblings are learning, like you said.
Yeah. That reminds me of a time. I have a sister that's 4 years older than me, and one of her spelling words was museum, and I learned how to spell that word because she was
you could hear her doing it all the time. That's awesome. Yeah.
But see, so people talk about, the spoiled babies that come after the oldest and all that birth order stuff. I'll tell you what, there's a resilience there when you're a little further down that line. So it always, like, I think about it even now, all this time later, and it always kind of surprises me. Alex is my one that got hurt. He did not cry, never, not once. Whoa. The whole time in the hospital. Wow. He didn't, not even hardly a whimper.
Wow.
And he just sort of took everything in stride. Like, it was just not a big deal. And some of that was the head injury. Some of that was a concussion, you know.
But
some
still,
of that was no, and he like I said, they said, well, we got to do this, and he did, after multiple attempts to just try and pry his eye open. Oh no, there was a doctor, he came in and tried a couple times, and you can see Alex, he's just sweating and shaking. And the doctor leaves, and he comes back 20 minutes later, and he has different equipment that he's going to try, and you, as a parent, you understand the necessity of it. Like, we need to see what's wrong, but then you're like, you're ready to jump on this doctor. You're ready to just pummel this guy because he's hurting your baby.
But you put your trust into them, knowing that, hey, they could save his eye if there's something that damaged. You don't want your kid to be blind.
So does your son still have vision problems, or?
So it's something that we work on. Okay. As long as we stay on top of it, don't have too many issues. The really miraculous thing about all of it is they were afraid that he had just completely obliterated his eye with the force and the pressure. And the doctor, even before they looked at his eye, said, you know what, you really need to be prepared that, he's probably going to need multiple surgeries. We don't know if his eye if we can save it, if it would be worth saving. They really did a good job trying to prepare me. But by the way, nothing really prepares you for that. So when they finally got a good look at his eye, the doctor was shocked. He said, you know what, his eye doesn't look very bad.
That's really good.
Right?
Yeah.
So then they didn't, in the hospital, they didn't do like an acuity test, but they're like, his tracking isn't too bad. He seems to be able to focus. And then when we were discharged, they sent us to multiple ophthalmologists. I had no idea there were so many specialties in ophthalmology until this. There are a lot.
Oh yeah.
I think we saw 5 or 6.
Really? Wow.
All for different things.
I had no clue.
But there again, why would you need to know? Right. Unless it was something you needed, why would you even need to know that?
Right.
And so it was down the road. It was actually several weeks before we went to all of these different ophthalmologists, and each one of them, they tested his acuity, and his acuity was fine. So he actually has, even now, he has a little bit better than 20/20 vision.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
Because you would think anything could go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
No, and that's, like I said, every single doctor really did a good job trying to prepare me.
Mm-hmm.
This is unusual. This may not last. There are going to be some complications along the way. This is not going to be forever, and he's probably going to need some help with it. And I was like, okay. And now you feel like, oh, okay, yeah, I can handle that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not knowing what it is. And as the days progressed, he ended up being okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we had some issues with double vision. We had issues with light sensitivity. We had, we did have some issues with convergence divergence. That's getting your eyes to work together.
Oh, sure.
That binocular vision sort of a thing. He had an issue with tracking. So when you want to read a book and your eyes move across the page, we had some issues with that. He was actually, I didn't know it was a thing. Again, I had no idea what kind of doctor to take him to. He was diagnosed with a visual processing problem. The best way I can describe it is if you were to look at a page that you're reading and your eyes see them, but your brain doesn't process them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if I have him read out loud, and he's much better now, but if I have him read out loud, sometimes he'll just miss a word.
Yeah.
He'll be reading the page and just his fluency is great, but he'll read something and that will be missing, or that, and you're like, whoa, back up. That didn't make any sense.
Right.
And to him, like somewhere in his brain, I think it's rattling around in there somewhere still, but it didn't come out because his brain didn't process it.
Yeah. So it's more of a brain thing, not an actual vision thing.
Yes.
Because he can see the words and that those are fine and he's tracking across, but then all of a sudden the processing in the brain.
It's interesting because I struggle with words on the very right hand of the page. I skip them sometimes.
That's interesting. And to him, like I said, he sees them and is aware of them. His brain just, for whatever reason, doesn't do it, doesn't translate it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's the perfect segue into how you came up with the idea for Brainstorms for brain injury.
So, I don't know about you, but we actually got really, really lucky in so many ways. I've heard so many stories along the way where people didn't get the same kind of help that we did.
Yeah.
When we were discharged from Primary Children's, one of the discharge orders was they had already set up an appointment with the rehabilitation clinic. So they had an appointment for us to see a physical medicine and rehabilitation doctor. And I can't even stress how important that is. Your care after, because of the neuroplasticity, and kind of strike while the iron is hot, so to speak, is so important. But one of the reasons, because of the circumstance of his accident, we were actually involved in a lawsuit. Some safety issues and things like that. And our attorney was really great about it. He's like, when I would have questions, he's like, well, maybe we need to go see a doctor for that. He's like, I don't have an explanation for that, and I need to be able to explain that. And so I had this really great attorney that was doing all of this research for me, because he needed answers. But I mean, so many things that I had no idea what some of these specialties were. And, we would see a doctor that was recommended to us, and he would say, hey, I need you to go and see an audiologist, or I need you to go and see, a developmental ophthalmologist, or, again, things that I was like, I've never heard of a developmental ophthalmologist. but he was diagnosed with all of these different things. So when he was discharged, they kept telling us, we're going to have issues with seizures and brain bleeds and swelling. And so you're going to be back here. And he didn't have any of those things. And he really was kind of the miracle. Yeah. They try their best to say, you know what, he might be in a semi-vegetative state. He may or may not make it through the night. We may end up doing multiple surgeries. They had already explained, what swelling, what happens when the brain swells. And so I kept thinking all these things, and then none of them happened.